The crisp white envelope felt accusatory in Alex's hand. The official HOA letter had a stark symbol of neighborhood authority that usually dealt with mundane issues like lawn maintenance or trash placement. Alex had always been a quiet resident, meticulously adhering to the community guidelines, so the thickness of the envelope and the weight of its contents sparked an immediate sense of unease. Settling onto the porch swing with a sigh, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, Alex carefully tore open the seal. The first thing that fell out was a glossy, full-color photograph of their house, the American flag hanging proudly, if somewhat faded, from the porch railing. A large, red circle had been digitally drawn around the flag, accompanied by a bold, underlined caption, "Notice of Violation." Alex's heart sank. Scanning the accompanying letter, the clinical language of the HOA detailed the infraction: failure to maintain an acceptable standard of appearance regarding displayed flags, specifically item number 3.b of the community bylaws, which mandates that all displayed flags must be in good condition, free from excessive fading, tears, or other signs of disrepair. The flag currently displayed at your residence has been deemed unsightly and in violation of these standards. A fine of $250 was clearly stated, due within 15 days, with escalating penalties for continued noncompliance. Alex stared at the photograph, then at the actual flag gently swaying in the breeze. It was true. The colors weren't as vibrant as they once were, and there was a small fray along one edge, a testament to years of sun, rain, and wind. But to call it ugly, to levy a fine, it felt deeply personal, an unwarranted intrusion into something cherished. This wasn't just any flag. It was Grandpa Joe's flag. Memories flooded back. The 4th of July parades, Grandpa Joe's withered hand holding theirs as they waved it together, the solemn way it was draped over his coffin. Grandpa Joe, a veteran, had carried this flag with him through countless Memorial Day ceremonies, each crease and imperfection a silent story of patriotism and service. After he passed away 5 years ago, the flag had become Alex's most treasured possession, a tangible link to a man who had shaped their life in profound ways. Hanging it on the porch was a daily tribute, a quiet way of keeping his memory alive. The thought of replacing it with a pristine, factory-fresh banner felt like a betrayal, an erasure of that history. Alex reread the letter, a surge of defiance bubbling up. They wouldn't simply pay the fine and take down the flag. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about heritage, about honoring a legacy. Clutching the letter in one hand, Alex carefully unhooked the flag from its pull, the familiar weight and feel of the worn fabric comforting. Bringing it inside, they laid it gently on the large oak dining table, the afternoon light streaming through the window illuminating its faded glory. Running a hand across the stripes, Alex traced the outline of a barely visible stain, a remnant of spilled lemonade from a long-ago summer picnic with Grandpa Joe. Each imperfection held a memory, a story. As Alex's fingers brushed along the hem of the blue canton, they noticed something unusual, a small, almost imperceptible bulge. Intrigued, Alex carefully turned the flag over, examining the stitching along the edge. There, hidden within the seam, was a tiny, meticulously sewn pocket, no bigger than a thumbnail. With trembling fingers, Alex gently worked it open, revealing a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Unfolding it with the utmost care, Alex's breath caught in their throat. Scrawled in faded ink were a series of numbers and letters, seemingly random, followed by a single word. Remember. What did it mean? What secret did Grandpa Joe's flag hold? A shiver ran down Alex's spine. The HOA's petty fine had inadvertently unearthed something far more significant, a mystery woven into the very fabric of this beloved artifact. The fight with the HOA had just become a whole lot more complicated, and infinitely more interesting. Alex stared at the yellowed slip of paper, the numbers and letters a cryptic jumble, B17A for 13, followed by the single, faded word. Remember, it felt like a riddle, a key without a lock. The discovery had completely eclipsed the HOA fine, transforming a petty squabble into a hunt for a forgotten truth. The frayed American flag, now carefully folded on the dining table, no longer seemed like a simple heirloom. It was a puzzle box, and Alex was just beginning to pry it open. The first few hours were a blur of digital searches, typing the code into search engines and military archive databases, but the results were always generic, leading to dead ends and unrelated military jargon. Alex quickly realized this wasn't a digital key. It was a physical one, a hint meant to be deciphered with context. The only context they had was Grandpa Joe's military service, a legacy passed down in fragments of stories and old family photos. The next morning, fueled by coffee and a newfound purpose, Alex went to the local library, a vast brick building with archives that stretched back over a century. The musty scent of old paper and leather was a comforting contrast to the cold, officious tone of the HOAS letter. Alex buried themselves in microfiche readers and digital databases, searching for any mention of Grandpa Joe's unit, the 4th Infantry Division, during World War II. The search was a grueling, mind-numbing process of scrolling through endless reels of blurry newspaper headlines and digitized military records. For hours, Alex's eyes burned as they scanned for a name, a date, anything that would connect their grandfather to the code. The library's archivist, a kind woman named Eleanor, noticed Alex's persistence. "Research can be a slow burn," she said, her voice soft. "Sometimes you have to look for the fire, not the ash." Her words resonated. Instead of searching for the name, Alex began looking for the events, the battles, and the moments Grandpa Joe had mentioned in passing. A breakthrough came when Alex found a digitized collection from the local historical society. It was a goldmine of local history, filled with photographs and articles about the town's heroes who served in various wars. A small article from 1945 caught Alex's attention, detailing the homecoming of a local infantry unit. The headline read, "Local Heroes Return, Town Celebrates." The article was short, but it mentioned a specific detail, a makeshift victory parade where the returning soldiers carried a few flags from the front lines. One of those flags was described as bearing a unique tear, a testament to a harrowing battle in the B-17 sector. The code B-17 clicked instantly in Alex's mind. With newfound excitement, Alex navigated the archives to the Historical Society's photo collection. Scrolling through hundreds of black and white images, their heart pounding with every click, Alex finally found it. The photo was a grainy, slightly faded image from the 1945 parade. It was a candid shot of a young, battle-worn soldier standing among a crowd of cheering townspeople. He was holding an American flag on a simple wooden pole. Alex zoomed in. There, breath held captive in their lungs. The flag in the photograph had the same unique, small fray along the edge, the same pattern of fading. And there, unmistakable, was the small, distinct tear in the fabric. The caption beneath the photo confirmed everything. Private Joseph Thompson holds his unit's flag at the 1945 Victory Parade. This very flag, torn during the Battle of B-17A for 1-3, a key engagement in the liberation of a small French town, was the first American banner to fly over the newly secured area. Alex's mind reeled. The numbers and letters weren't a code. They were a battle designation, a unit number, a date. Grandpa Joe hadn't just served. He had been a part of a pivotal moment in history, and his flag was a priceless artifact. From it, just as the weight of this discovery fully settled, Alex's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Alex's hand trembled as they read the words, "Heard you're looking into some old stories." "That's a mistake. The HOA has already made its decision. Let it go." It was Mrs. Gable. How could she possibly know what Alex was doing? A cold wave of fear washed over Alex, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce resolve. The petty fine was no longer the issue. Someone was actively trying to stop them from uncovering the truth. The story of Grandpa Joe's flag was more than just a family legacy, it was a secret someone desperately wanted to keep buried. The chilling text from Mrs. Gable hung in the air, a stark reminder that the HOA's interest in Alex's flag extended beyond mere aesthetic concerns. But the discovery of the photograph, the undeniable link to the Battle of B-17A-13, fueled a sense of purpose that overshadowed the intimidation. Alex spent the rest of the day immersed in research, corroborating the historical details mentioned in the newspaper article and the photograph's caption. Military archives online confirmed the significance of the Battle of B-17A-13, a fierce and costly engagement that had been instrumental in liberating a strategically important town in Nazi-occupied France. The 4th Infantry Division had suffered heavy losses, and their bravery had been widely recognized. The fact that Grandpa Joe's unit flag, the very one hanging on Alex's porch, had been the first American banner raised over the liberated town transformed it from a personal keepsake into a tangible piece of history. Alex found digitized eyewitness accounts from soldiers who had fought in the battle, many mentioning the resilience and symbolic importance of their unit flag. One particularly moving account described how, after heavy shelling had torn the flag, a young private had risked his life to retrieve the fallen banner and, under heavy fire, had stitched it back together with whatever thread he could find. Alex carefully examined their own flag again. The small fray, the almost invisible repair, could these be remnants of that very act of battlefield heroism? The thought sent a shiver of awe down Alex's spine. This wasn't just a flag, it was a silent witness to courage and sacrifice. Armed with this overwhelming historical evidence, Alex knew they couldn't back down. The HOA's demand for conformity paled in comparison to the flag's profound significance. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room where the flag lay bathed in a soft, golden light, a courier arrived. He carried a registered mail envelope bearing the unmistakable logo of a prominent local law firm. Alex's heart sank. This was the escalation they had anticipated, but dread still coiled in their stomach as they tore open the envelope. Inside was a formal legal letter from the law firm of Henderson and Stern, representing the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The letter was addressed to Alex and began with a dry, legalistic recitation of the initial violation notice. Regarding the unsightly flag, however, the tone quickly shifted. The letter acknowledged Alex's communication with the HOA, presumably Mrs. Gable's report, referencing their claim about the flag's historical significance. But instead of expressing any interest or understanding, the letter dismissed the claim as unsubstantiated and irrelevant to the community's aesthetic guidelines. It further stated that the HOA had conducted its own internal review and found no compelling reason to deviate from the established bylaws. The letter then took a sharp turn, accusing Alex of harassment and creating a nuisance within the community by pursuing these frivolous claims. It warned of potential legal action against Alex if the offensive flag was not removed immediately and the outstanding fine paid. A paragraph in bold, underlined text was particularly chilling. Please be advised that any attempt to further publicize unsubstantiated claims regarding the flag's alleged historical value will be considered defamatory and will be met with swift and decisive legal action. The letter concluded with a stern deadline for compliance and a thinly veiled threat of additional fines and legal fees. Alex felt a surge of anger mixed with a growing sense of isolation. The HOA wasn't just being bureaucratic, they were actively trying to silence them, to bury the truth about the flag. The mention of defamation felt particularly menacing, suggesting they were aware of the potential public relations nightmare this could become if the story got out. Holding the legal letter in one hand and the photograph of Grandpa Joe holding his historic flag in the other, Alex felt a renewed sense of determination. They wouldn't be intimidated. This wasn't just about a flag anymore. It was about standing up to power, about honoring history, and about ensuring that the sacrifices of heroes like Grandpa Joe were never forgotten. The battle with the HOA had officially escalated. moving from petty fines to legal threats. Alex knew the road ahead would be challenging, but armed with the truth, they were ready to fight. The confrontation with the HOA board, and undoubtedly with Mrs. Gable, was now inevitable, and Alex was prepared to bring irrefutable evidence to the table. The quiet life in Willow Creek Estates was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The community hall was packed, the plastic folding chairs filled to capacity and a nervous energy buzzing in the humid air. The scent of stale coffee and disinfectant hung over the proceedings, a fitting backdrop for the unpleasant business at hand. At the front, seated behind a long table, were the members of the Willow Creek Estates HOA board. In the center, a stern-faced woman with a severe bob and a pristine blazer, the president of the board, Ms. Albright. To her right sat the woman who had delivered the fine and the initial verbal sparring, Mrs. Gable, a small, pinched smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. The crowd was a mix of apathetic curiosity and outright disdain for the proceedings, with many residents more interested in their phones than the agenda. Ms. Albright rapped a gavel to call the meeting to order, her voice cold and measured. "Good evening, everyone. We have a full agenda tonight, but we'll begin with a homeowner dispute. A resident has contested a violation notice regarding a flag. Mrs. Gable, please provide a summary." Mrs. Gable stood, her gaze sweeping the room, with a practiced air of authority. "Thank you, Ms. Albright. The resident at 4503 Pinebrook Drive, Alex, was issued a notice of violation for displaying a flag in a state of disrepair. In violation of bylaw 3.2b, the fine remains unpaid, and the resident has not complied with the request for removal. Furthermore, the resident has made what we consider to be frivolous claims about the flag's historical significance, which are irrelevant to our community's standards of appearance. We are recommending the board approve a motion to increase the fine and begin legal proceedings." Her words were a torrent of cold bureaucracy, designed to shut down the discussion before it even began. A murmur ran through the crowd. Alex stood up, their hands gripping the back of the chair in front of them, a thick folder of evidence clutched tight. "Excuse me, I have a right to speak," Alex said, their voice trembling slightly but firm. Ms. Albright's eyes narrowed. "The board will hear your statement, but we will not entertain a debate on established bylaws. Please be brief." Taking a deep breath, Alex walked to the front of the room, standing before the long table, the full weight of the crowd's silent judgment and Mrs. Gable's hostile stare bearing down on them. Alex didn't open the folder right away. They started with a story, a memory. "My grandfather, Joseph Thompson, served in World War II. When he passed away, this flag was his most cherished possession. He told me that every thread, every stain, was a reminder of something important. When I was a kid, he'd tell me stories about it, but I never really understood." The crowd's apathetic posture shifted. A few people looked up from their phones. Mrs. Gable sighed audibly, a look of impatience on her face. Mrs. Gable called this flag unsightly and in a state of disrepair. "I agree. It's not perfect. It's not new. But that's because it's not just a flag," Alex continued, their voice gaining strength. They opened the folder and pulled out the old, grainy photograph from the library archives, holding it up for everyone to see. They saw it. "This is a photograph from 1945, a victory parade for local heroes returning from the war. And this is my grandfather, a young man, holding this very flag." A gasp echoed through the room. People leaned forward in their chairs. Alex then pulled out the photocopied military documents and a printout of the digitized article. "I discovered this flag was flown over the Battle of B-17A for 13. It was the first American flag to fly over a liberated French town. A small, but pivotal battle. An eyewitness account from a fellow soldier described how it was torn in the fighting, and how it was sewn back together on the battlefield, a symbol of their unit's unbreakable spirit." Alex carefully held up their own flag again, pointing to the small fray and the barely visible, expertly mended tear. "This isn't disrepair. This is history. This is a battlefield artifact. It's a testament to the sacrifice of my grandfather and his entire unit. This isn't just about the aesthetics of my front porch. This is about honoring a veteran's legacy. It's about remembering what this flag truly represents. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into vocal support. "Leave the kid alone," one person shouted. "That's a piece of history," another added. Mrs. Gable tried to bang her gavel, but it was lost in the growing noise of the crowd. The board members looked panicked. The tide had turned completely. Ms. Albright, the board president, remained motionless, her face an unreadable mask. She waited for a moment, letting the noise swell, then she raised her hand for silence. The room gradually hushed, everyone's eyes now on her, expecting her to concede. But she didn't. Instead, a cold, almost predatory smile crossed her lips. "Alex, your passion and research are admirable," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "And let's assume, for a moment, that everything you've said is true. That the flag is a genuine historical artifact." She paused, allowing the crowd to cheer, before holding up a finger to stop them. "Even if we were to accept that, it changes nothing. There is a specific clause in our bylaws section for point 1c, to be precise, that states, no resident may display any item on their property, regardless of its artistic, historical, or cultural value, that presents a potential shareability to the association or its members. We have a legal opinion from our firm that if we were to make an exception for an item of such immense value, we would be assuming shareability for its security, preservation, and potential damage. Furthermore, it could open the door for all residents to claim similar exceptions for their historical items, creating chaos. We simply cannot take on that risk." The hall went silent. The air, which moments ago had been thick with triumphant energy, was now filled with a suffocating sense of defeat. Alex stood frozen, the legal letter's vague threats now making perfect, chilling sense. Mrs. Gable smiled, a genuine, malicious grin this time. The battle hadn't been won. It had just taken a devastating, and completely unexpected, turn. The air in the community hall hung thick with disbelief. Ms. Albright's pronouncement, citing the obscure hostility clause, had effectively deflated the burgeoning support for Alex. Mrs. Gable's smug expression seemed to solidify the HOA's unyielding position. For a moment, despair threatened to engulf Alex. The weight of their grandfather's legacy, the arduous research, the emotional presentation, all seemed futile against the cold, calculated maneuvering of the HOA board. But within that moment of despair, a flicker of determination ignited. Alex remembered Eleanor, the kind archivist, and her advice. Sometimes you have to look for the fire, not the ash. Ms. Albright's liability clause was the ash. Alex needed to find the fire within it. Days turned into a whirlwind of frantic research. Alex pored over legal dictionaries, community law websites, and even contacted a pro bono legal aid service. The liability clause, as presented by Ms. Albright, seemed insurmountable. It gave the HOA broad discretionary power to restrict anything deemed a potential risk. Then, buried deep within the community's original incorporation documents, Alex found it, a clause that Ms. Albright had conveniently overlooked. Section 2.3a stated, "The association shall not unduly restrict the display of patriotic symbols, particularly those with demonstrable historical significance, except in cases where such display poses an imminent and direct threat to the safety or well-being of residents." The keywords, unduly restrict and demonstrable historical significance. Armed with this new revelation, Alex requested another meeting with the HOA board, this time sending a formal letter referencing the specific clause they had uncovered. The atmosphere in the subsequent meeting was markedly different. The board members, especially Ms. Albright and Mrs. Gable, looked uneasy. The news of the liability clause had spread through the community, but so had whispers of Alex's continued digging. Alex began calmly, laying out the historical evidence once more, this time with an added emphasis on the flag's undeniable historical significance, a fact now supported by local newspaper archives and even a brief mention in a state historical society publication Alex had found online. Ms. Albright cited Section 4.1c, the liability clause, as the reason for their continued demand for the flag's removal. Alex stated, their voice steady and confident. However, she neglected to mention Section 2.3a of our community's founding documents, which specifically protects the display of patriotic symbols with demonstrable historical significance, unless there is an imminent threat to safety. A hush fell over the room. Ms. Albright's face tightened, and Mrs. Gable shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This flag, Alex continued, holding up the photograph of Grandpa Joe, is not just a piece of cloth. It is a documented artifact from a significant battle that contributed to the freedoms we all enjoy. To unduly restrict its display based on a vague notion of liability, when its historical significance is clearly demonstrable, directly contradicts the foundational principles of our community as laid out in Section 2.3a. A murmur of agreement rippled through their residents. They had been swayed by Ms. Albright's legal jargon before, but Alex's discovery of a counter clause, especially one protecting patriotic symbols, resonated deeply. Ms. Albright attempted to regain control. The legal opinion we received still stands. An artifact of that age and value presents inherent risks, but the clause specifically addresses patriotic symbols of historical significance. Alex countered, their voice rising slightly. The intent is clearly to protect these symbols, not to allow them to be arbitrarily banned under the guise of liability. Where is the imminent and direct threat to safety? Is a faded flag, a silent testament to history, truly a danger to anyone? The community members began to voice their support for Alex, their initial apprehension replaced by a sense of outrage at the HOA's blatant disregard for their own founding principles. Several residents who had researched the Battle of B-17A for 1-3 of the last meeting spoke up, sharing details and expressing their pride in having such a tangible piece of history in their community. Cornered and losing the support of the residents, Ms. Albright tried one last tactic. Even if the flag has historical value, its current condition is unsightly. It detracts from the overall aesthetic of our community. This time, Mrs. Gable chimed in, her voice sharp. Yes, it's an eyesore. Our bylaws clearly state standards for flag display. Alex turned to address them directly. The bylaws regarding the condition of flags were clearly intended for ordinary, commercially produced flags. They were not written with historically significant artifacts in mind. To apply those rules rigidly to a flag that survived a major battle and was carried by a local hero is not only insensitive, but also a gross misinterpretation of the spirit of our community. Just then, a local news crew, alerted by an anonymous tip likely from one of the increasingly sympathetic residents, arrived at the hall. The sight of the camera and microphone further rattled the HOA board. Sensing their victory, Alex made a final plea. This isn't just about me keeping my grandfather's flag. It's about preserving history, about honoring our veterans, and about ensuring that our community's rules are applied fairly and with common sense. Forcing me to remove this flag would be a disservice to my grandfather's memory and a loss for our entire community. Under the glare of the news camera and the unwavering gaze of the now firmly supportive residents, Ms. Albright's resolve finally crumbled. Her face pale, she stammered, "The board will reconsider its position in light of the newly presented information and the community's feedback." Mrs. Gable shot her a furious look, but even her staunch opposition seemed to waver under the weight of public scrutiny. The final resolution came a week later. The HOA issued a formal apology to Alex, rescinding the fine and acknowledging the historical significance of the flag. More than that, they announced plans to work with Alex and the local historical society to properly document and even potentially display the flag in a place of honor within the community. The ugly flag, once a source of contention, became a symbol of community pride. children would stop by Alex's house, their parents recounting the story of Grandpa Joe and his heroic service. The small fray and the mended tear were no longer signs of disrepair, but badges of honor. Alex never forgot Grandpa Joe's stories, or the hidden message. Remember, the fight with the HOA had not only saved a precious heirloom, but had also unearthed a vital piece of local history, ensuring that the sacrifices of the past would indeed be remembered. Proudly waving in the breeze for all to see, Mrs. Gable remained on the HOA board, but became noticeably less assertive. The memory of her defeat a constant reminder of the power of history and community spirit. Ms. Albright eventually stepped down, the controversy surrounding the flag having tarnished her reputation within Willow Creek Estates. The little community, once focused on perfectly manicured lawns and uniform appearances, had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of heritage and the true meaning of community.